Hi, everybody. This is Doug Reeves. We're going to start in 1 minute, but I would like to just do a sound and video check to make sure that you can see me and Dr. Foley. And if you can't see me, you're not missing anything. So, focus on Dr. Foley. We'll start in 60 seconds. It would also really help me if you would use the question function to let me know that you have good audio and video. Thanks. Okay, we have great audio and video. Thank you from coast to coast for participating in this. So this is the largest participation we have ever had in a webinar, and I really appreciate your taking time in this difficult time to be with us. So just a couple of things before we get underway. Let's see if I can make the technology work right. Be patient with me. I'm terribly sorry about the delay. Just be patient for a moment until I can get the dashboard up. Okay, so thanks very much, everybody, for your patience. My name is Doug Reeves. I'm the CEO of Creative Leadership Solutions, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Kate Anderson Foley, who is a nationally known, internationally known special educator. And what she is here to talk about with the largest audience we have ever had for a webinar is navigating special education in the age of the coronavirus. So, Dr. Anderson Foley, first of all, thank you for being here. And I'm going to slides and ask you to help us start with the learning targets.
Yes, thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad that there was a great audience for this webinar. This is such a timely topic, but first and foremost, I want to say you are all doing a wonderful job. And you know, the fact that you're on this webinar just shows the character that you're trying to do the right thing, and that my hat's off to you. So let's just go ahead and dive right in, because I want to have time for questions and answers and some discussion. You'll see the learning targets, and it's just straightforward. You know, what does the law require? What are those legal considerations that you really do need to have, but also the practical ones, the practice, this is why we're having this webinar. And then the importance of communication. While we always knew it was important, it is going to play a very vital role during this very difficult time. So next slide, please.
And Dr. Anderson Foley, I just want to interrupt briefly to say, please don't wait until the end. If you have questions and challenges that you're facing, please use the question or chat function. I'll make sure that I toss those to Kate.
Okay,
please
great, thank you. So we're on the next slide, what the law requires.
Exactly.
So it's really, really important to understand, there's been a lot of guidance coming out, a lot of pieces of paper, a lot of emails that we've all been having, but it's really important to distinguish what the law says, what's guidance. What is coming out of the U.S. Department of Education is not the law, it is guidance. And while it tells you what the thinking is, really step back and say, I really need to anchor everything that I'm doing, school, district, teacher, whoever at family, on the federal laws, specifically the IDEA, the Special Education Law, Section 504 of the Rehab Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and all those amendments that happened back in 2008 when the amendments happened. And also, of course, everything is nested within the Every Student Succeeds Act. So that's really important context, the federal law. And then from that are the state regulations. I make sure, please, to check with your State Department on a regular basis. Not only are they communicating, but the information is coming out so quickly right now. It's very important for you to have that active, go-to button for that. And as I mentioned, these are, the IDEA is very specific. It's an affirmative law. That means we, the educators, need to do something. We can't sit and wait. Whereas Section 504 and the ADA is really about non-discrimination, those civil rights laws. Important to note, and this is just the context, the IDEA is time-bound, so depending on what state you're in, usually from 3 through 21, where Section 504 and the ADA is not age bound. So those are important contexts as we're thinking through those non-discrimination acts, both for students as well as for adults. And I hope there's superintendents, some other districts leadership in here, because you really do understand that it's the adults as well as the children. So let's next slide, please.
Yes, and Kate, I want to let our participants know that all of these slides are available to you for free. They should already have been downloaded to you, but if for any reason you don't have them, just email service@creativeleadership.net and we'll make sure that you get them. We'll also have a recording of this video so that you can share this with any colleagues that you would like. Thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So we're on, I want to talk about these two that I see as more straightforward, and that is during extended school closure. So that should be the slide that you have. Yes. And the first one is very straightforward. When schools are closed, when the district is closed, no services are delivered, no services are required. That is for the IDEA, Section 504, etc. So that one's pretty straightforward. The second one, please consider this, that the schools are open, but students on IEPs or Section 504 plans might be absent for extended periods of time. Why is that? You have to go in and have a case-by-case basis. But here's where you can start to look at things, especially now. The coronavirus, COVID-19, is the perfect example of why students, maybe they've got health-related issues, maybe they're in remission from cancer, etc., that they cannot attend school. And so you think about the term homebound instruction. Well, let's look at that, because there's some great avenues for you in the district that tap into the homebound people, because they've got a lot of information, a lot of services, a lot of resources, a lot of tools, software, etc. So students are not there. You have to consider the reasons why. The word consider, put that within your legal lexicon. The word consider, and I'm going to be using that again and again, is a legal way to protect the district, protect yourself, protect the student. So you consider the reasons why that absent. Then you provide some of those services. I gave you a couple of examples. It could be homebound, it could be distance, it could be teleintervention and teletherapy, it could be synchronous. That means like we're doing right now. It could be asynchronous. You've recorded something and now you're posting it or delivering it in a way for the students. Keep detailed progress monitoring data, because that's very important, and all your records that go with that. communicate to the family, and be proactive in your manner in which you're doing that. I've heard, and I've actually been in meetings where people have said, no, sorry, we don't do that. We don't do that here, or no. That's probably not the best way to start a healthy relationship, but really pay attention to, what the case-by-case basis is. So those are the straightforward ones. Next slide.
Okay.
Now things become more nuanced. This is the reason why we're here today. This is the why that schools are struggling with how to best serve students on IEPs, Section 504 plans, etc. So the brick and mortar schools are closed, right? Because we can't be there, social distancing, etc. But schools are opened in a different way. They are opened virtually. They're open distance-wise, so learning distance. And there's a lot of information, again, that are probably flooding your emails right now. Be careful, be cautious, just have that critical eye as you're opening those things up, because it's easy to think that a product's going to do it when in fact it's not going to do that. So the brick and mortar's closed. We say school is going to start running, we're up and running, and we're doing it virtually. What does that look like? And that's the work that we're going to start to take a look at. So the next slide, please.
Okay.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the legal considerations and then really dive into the practical ones. But you're going to see that there's a nexus between the two, and there's interplay. And in your head, keep both of those in your mind as you're navigating the virtual world that we're living in now. First and foremost, students on IEPs and 504s are general education students. So what is everybody getting? And then start from there. Secondly, very, very important, this is the crux of it all, keep FAPE as the focus. We know FAPE as free and appropriate public education. The IEP is the vehicle to FAPE, okay? Section 504, there's a FAPE obligation. The plan is the vehicle for that. So if you haven't already done so, if your staff haven't already done so, now is the time to take your cases, review those IEPs, review the 504 plans, and start to pull out what are the essential goals of each of those IEPs or each of those plans. Identify what that explicit specialized instruction is, and then start to look at what are the accommodations, and you see it on your slides. Accommodations are how the student learns the material, where the modification is what the student is expected to learn. And so within those documents, there's going to be those two things there. And then looking at your progress monitoring data, this is going to be the key mechanism for determining FAPE. And I'll talk a little bit about on the practical side in the next couple slides about the importance of data. And really, you're going to be using the most current information that you have right now as that new baseline, if you will. And then yes?
I'm sorry, Kate, we just had several questions come in. So go ahead and finish your thought, and then I want to ask some questions from our listeners.
Sure, sure. And then the final legal consideration, this is very important. And I think sometimes districts, people get a little nervous about using the prior written notice. Utilize the prior written notice. The PWN is your friend in this regard, but it's really the legal protection for you and all the good practices that you're trying to do. So go ahead and, Doug, you had a couple questions?
Yes, we have several. First of all, are asynchronous services really equivalent to the direct services that are not directly provided?
So yes, they can be. So remember, it's a different delivery system, but you are explicitly providing that specialized instruction. Go back to what I mentioned earlier about taking the essential pieces of that IEP. If it's a decoding skill, you might be recording a very discrete lesson. It could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, depending on what the age is and the needs are of the student. And then, it doesn't have to be 100% asynchronous, virtual, if you will. You could have already been sending packets home. You could be doing some other types of things. You could be doing some real time, FaceTime, etc. So it's a way to say how we used to do this. Remember, we're leapfrogging off the notion of what we used to do face to face. I am doing it right now with you. If we were in a room, I'd be standing in front of you, but we're doing it here. That's real and that's direct.
The next one, Kate, is how do you recommend we monitor progress when we have limited access to students? What if the students don't complete the work, and what if their parents? This is not, I'm afraid, not clear. What if their parents are supposed to do for them?
So that's a great question. Progress monitoring data. Again, you're going to start to take what you currently have right now. You're going to explicitly, in this term, you're going to explicitly instruct in whatever that follow-up activity is for the student to do. Now, think about this and think about the age of the student. And then think too about how you're going to start to deliver it. You could be doing a portion of that within, let's say, within a general education setting, you as the intervention specialist with a gen ed teacher, again, or could be a teletherapy. So you're actually setting up the computer, you're presenting the lesson, the student's doing it, maybe you've set manipulatives home, you're watching, and the parent is there, whoever the adult is, and then you've got that piece of it. So you'd be able to monitor that. That's one example of how you can start to collect the data. If it's written, obviously you can do that. They can scan it in or email or however that delivery system needs to be.
Okay.
I think now is the time that we start to expand how we think about direct instruction. It is specially designed instruction. You are delivering it, but you're going to do it through a different way, but it is direct.
The next question is what online ABE software programs are available?
So I'm going to hold that question because at the end of the presentation, I've tried to give a lot of different types of things. Okay.
Okay. And what about SW, OT, and other speech services? How do we provide that?
So once we get to the next couple slides, we're going to start talking about that.
Okay.
Okay.
Just one more. We have so many questions coming in, and I promise all of you, with 500 people, we're going to respond individually to every single question that you have, and we'll also make sure that all of you have got the slides as well. Dr. Kate, please proceed.
So we're on the next slide where it talks about the practical considerations. So to the people on this webinar, the next reviews, this is kind of where we're going to start to make it real, right? In the beginning, I said, what does it look like? So those were legal considerations. Now we're going to start to move into, all right, how do you do it? So look at the first set. Again, I have to keep saying it. Remember that students with disabilities are general education students first. Start with what all students are getting. You got to almost suspend a little bit. We've used to being in the brick and mortar. We're in a different platform right now. What are your general education teachers doing? I'm hoping that you are in those team meetings, that you are partnering with the gen ed staff, however it looks, grade level teams, whatever, speech therapists, OTs, special ed teachers, what have you, okay? So that's the context in which I'm going. So start with what everybody's getting. How are they getting it? Are they getting it virtually? Are there paper packets going home? That's where you need to start, and then differentiate based on what that IEP is, right? Or that plan. Identify those accommodations and modifications, because remember, here's the nuance between legal and practical. It's about access. The more that you can show that you are providing materials, non-discrimination, you're providing the materials for a student, via however they get things in an IEP, could be auditory, could be large print, what have you. You are demonstrating, this is the legal nexus between legal and the practical, that you're demonstrating that you are not discriminating. Moreover, you're demonstrating you're providing access. Access leads to FAPE, okay? So I'm kind of putting a little breadcrumbs for you, because it really needs to be tight what you're doing. Keep FAPE in mind, okay? This is what I said, all hands on deck. You should be embedded in your grade level teams. I talked to somebody not too long ago. They were special ed, and they said, well, the regular education plan was this, this, and this. I said, well, where are you in that plan? Hence my comment to you. It is very important. We can do things differently. I'd say, you know, there's that saying, don't let a crisis go to waste. Well, here's a way to really move the needle on getting our services into a comprehensive way, okay? Here's an example. Record explicit instruction to students with IEPs so they can access the content. So that's where you're taking the look, thinking about, okay, so what's the lesson? We do it in person all the time. Could be preschool lesson, and it's working on directions from, you know, top to bottom or left to right. You can do that. You can film, you can show that, you can present it to the student. Again, send it through email or your online school portals, however your district is navigating the virtual world. And that's where the lessons would go.
So Kate, we have several people asking about, you know, what about families that do not have internet access,
Right.
or they may only have one person at a time and they've got several children. So how do we navigate that?
Right. So again, thinking back to what are the essential components of the IEP? As an example, think to your classroom. Let's say it's a preschool classroom and it's a 2.5 hour block. You are not going to have a 2.5 hour block with a preschool child. Pull out what are those essential functions of, be it reading, math, language, speech and language, occupational therapy, pulling those out, looking at those time frames. I've got to deliver explicit instruction. It might be a 10-minute lesson, and then start to go from there. Now, connectivity is a big problem, and that's why I say, depending on, you know, what makes sense for your district, how is your district doing it for all people? There are families that have smartphones, and that might be the only way that you're going to have a face-to-face interaction with the child. Hopefully the parent would be there. You could be providing the services via packets that are sent home or emailed. You know, if they have some connection. A lot of families do, even though they might not have connection in their homes. I know that's not the complete answer you want, but it's just going to depend on some of those real life factors.
And I think we also need to acknowledge that packets can be, frankly, crushingly boring for kids.
Totally.
So
Yeah, totally.
It's not going to happen. But let me ask a couple of more questions before you go on. How do you recommend that progress monitoring on behavior is happening through distance learning?
Yeah, so that is a harder one. I'm going to talk a little bit about that when it gets to IEP, and you might need to amend the IEP because you only have certain data that you're going to be able to pull, and that is before the school closures. You've been collecting data. Now,
Okay.
you can modify the IEP at any time. Don't forget that, and you can do that. You can say, you can even put in, I know I've done this at the district level, where because of a certain event, we're going to suspend that IEP goal for, let's say, 1 month. So think that through. What is the context of your district or your state? You know, what is the guidance that you want to provide? Remember, you can always have an IEP meeting. You can always modify that IEP. But at the same time, with behavior, you can also provide some survey or record, whatever the mechanism is, to the parent or the caregiver. I mean, at some point, you're going to have to, you know, let that process happen if that's how the district and that's how you want to proceed. And you are doing let's say an explicit lesson within the behavior realm. but you want the parent maybe to keep some notes on that and send them back. Is it a perfect situation? Probably not. But it's a way to, again, show that you are providing FAPE, show that you are considering all the different factors that are going on. So those are a couple real life experiences that I know I've dealt with. We agree, parent, that we're shelving this for this time period, very short time period, or you proceed in a different way.
So Kate, just two more quick questions before we go on to the next slide. And I want to assure everybody, we're going to respond to every single one of you. So please don't be frustrated if we don't get to your question right now. We will provide a personalized response to every single one of you, because we really do respect the time that you're investing in this. So just give us a few hours to get back. So Kate, just two more questions. Could you give us an example of what we use the PWN for?
Yeah. So the prior written notice would be for any decisions that you are making. Remember, I'm going to back it up. The prior written notice is the responsibility of the school district. Don't ever forget that. And it doesn't matter if maybe a family member isn't happy with how it is presented. It doesn't matter. I know that sounds cold, but it's the district's responsibility to do that. So you can use the written notice for just what we talked about. We've agreed to suspend, this behavior goal for 30 days, 30 school days, and then we will reconvene. It could be that. Parent, you have the information from the parent. We met on such and such a date, telephone, whatever. We discussed this. We discussed the pros and cons. The parent agreed. We are going to do this. We are going to meet by such and such a date. Date, time, details. And as I say later on in my presentation, if you have quotations from the parent, it could be the staff members as well, but just to be able to say that, yeah, we've memorialized, this is what we talked about. Not only is it a memory, tickler, but it also demonstrates, again, you as the district, that's your responsibility, are providing FAPE and those considerations.
And just one more, we've had several people call who are clearly frustrated about parents not communicating with them.
I know.
So what happens if parents are not communicating with the educators who are trying to support their kids?
Right, that's real. And so again, that's where prior written notice really does come in handy. I also say when you keep your own notes, please keep professional notes, and that the date that I tried to contact, the time, telephone number or email. This is what I said. Parent did not respond. You are legally protecting your district. You're legally protecting the process. You're protecting the student because you are in your good faith effort. And while the U.S. Department of Education and the Office of Civil Rights, they're providing guidance, the law will come in play. And let's say the parent files a complaint, you are then able to demonstrate all of these good faith efforts while obstacles were being put in your path. Okay.
So let's proceed to the next slide, please.
Just real fast, when you're thinking about those practical considerations or how you're explicitly providing those services, and let's say the general education 4th grade team is providing some lessons, virtually, synchronous, whatever. Flexible grouping, look at the LRE piece. Our kids might be able to start to go in there. You might not need to change the IEP, modify the IEP, but that's just a consideration that I really want you to keep in mind, okay? All right, so the next slide. Other practical considerations. This is where I want to show you a couple different examples of how we start to implement these things. Real important. I know you're special educators. You are amazing. But this is what I'd say to principals, superintendents, all the general education staff, what have you. Leverage the expertise of the specialists. Intervention specialists, special ed. EL teachers, related service providers, your assistive technology folks, there's a lot of specialty, school psychologists for sure, occupational therapists. So here's an example. We've talked about how do you legally, these are the legal considerations. Here are some practical considerations. Now here are some suggestions or some examples. You've got special education, general education. Now is the time to really co-plan, because you're, as a special education teacher, going to be able to say, I've got these 5 students. I need to get this particular language arts, decoding skills or what have comprehension skills. I need to make sure that they're in there. You can start to do those things together, and you can start to deliver them together, and that you're providing that service as well. But word of caution, remember I said in the very beginning, you need to go in and do your IEP autopsies, 504 plan autopsy. You need to know exactly where you all are by grade level, by district, by school, okay? So you're going to co-plan, co-teach. You can deliver the content. You and your teacher can be recording a lesson and going back and forth. I mean, it can be dynamic in that regard. Example, speech and language pathologist and the teacher. Again, there are specific things on the student's IEP. You want to make sure that they're in there. Maybe it's the language, expression, and there's a great way to do that. Co-plan. Do that. Co-plan, co-teach, co-deliver. There's nothing that says in the IDEA that you cannot do that. It's direct instruction. I, as the speech path, am working with the gen ed teacher and doing that. Now, here's an example with occupational therapy, OT. They can model those skills that the teacher then can reinforce throughout. In person, it's a little bit easier, but there again, you've now documented that here is a lesson, here is how you start to model, breaking down some things, maybe it's chunking, maybe it's orienting the page. This is a difficult, navigation for a student, face to face. When I'm usually looking at the teacher, well, now I'm looking at this. I'm not quite sure what this is, right? And so OTs and PTs can be really extremely helpful in that regard. They can send home manipulatives that the student is going to absolutely use because they've used them in school. Now they're going to use them at home. AT, the assistive tech person, please make sure that you tap into AT, your homebound folks, because they have an amazing array of materials online, adapted equipment, example, Learning Ally, a lot of the books that come down, audio books. There's an amazing amount of software out there that, again, these are unusual times. And if we say there's a license for X amount of computers, your AT folks, special ed director, whoever it is, you can work with companies. They're doing a lot of good things right now. And I say you need to start leveraging that piece of it. Don't forget, universal design is that great equalizer for a lot of our kids. These ways are also a great way to meet LRE, even though we know that we're meeting LRE in this different way, this different universe almost. But FAPE, through that IEP or that 504 plan, is going to get you where you need to go. Don't ever forget that this is a federal law and the state laws that go and the regulations that go with that. But that's just a great way to do that. I got a question not too long ago about self-contained instruction. It also works in this regard. So again, I go back to, let's say self-contained, they're in there for, 4 hours a day. Well, number one, you are not going to be sitting in front of a computer for 4 hours a day. That's why I keep going back to pull out what is the essential pieces of the IEP. Make sure you're communicating with the families. Put it in that prior written notice. Make sure and communicate with your families all the way through. Now is the time for great transparency. Next slide. So this is where I want to start talking about the data piece. And it was a great question in the beginning. You have to, based on where we are right now, we've been closed. Some schools have been closed because of spring break, and now they've gotten an extra 2 weeks. The state's all over the place. So it depends on, context matters, right? Where are you in your state and in your district? Now, again, there are some schools districts that are closed until the middle of April. Some are done for the rest of the year. It just depends. But what is the most recent data point that you all have? Is it per the IEP? Is it, let's say, MAP assessments, mid-year, winter benchmarking, whatever it might be? That's going to be your current baseline, because what you're now going to start to do is look at, not only you're looking at the length of that IEP, but you're almost looking as if it's like a mini IEP. So where is it now? And I'm going to be providing my services, not face-to-face, but in a different way. And then I'm going to start using my data, progress monitoring data. I say keep tight data. This is where you can't let things start to fall off to the side. What's your rubric? However you're presenting that data, communicating it to the family. It could be that you are watching a student. That could be an actual data gathering. It could be a sample from the student. Now, here's an example of synchronous. It could be you're presenting something, chunk it however it is, and if the student has a Chromebook or computer or whatever it is, they can type something is. Now you've got a writing sample. You can have a student asynchronous be able to record a reading of a passage. It might be a sentence or two, however it is. Now is the time that you can't be constrained by past practices in the creativity arena. Now we can kind of loosen that and say, well, how can I do that in a different way? I also say this, don't be afraid to start talking about compensatory services and ESY, extended school year services. I have in the parentheses, district administration must be on the same page. So that's not to say you as a teacher can just say, oh, of course you're going to get ESY. No, that's not what I'm saying. You need to have a coordinated response. You as the district leader, be it the director, the assistant soup, the soup, you need to have clear understanding. Confer with your attorneys on this one, but you really can't be afraid to start talking, or even knowing in the back of your mind, compensatory services. Yep. So compensatory is just that. There's been an interruption. The district is saying, we are going to give you compensatory services. Again, I'm not here to tell you what those services are, how they're going to be delivered, but it is certainly a consideration. Remember, we're in unprecedented times. So to have this very strict box of, no services, or we're going to fight to the end for ESY, I'm not sure that that's going to serve the district well. There'll always be people who are going to file a complaint. We know that. That's just our reality. But then you'd also then be able to show all those efforts, both legally and best good faith efforts, to really move and to grow the student along. But again, don't forget, you can always revise the IEP. Next slide. So I'm going to move to evaluations. So these were big global pieces of how you can start to put some practice into real life methodologies. Okay, but questions have come up about the evaluation process. Hey, we've got an initial evaluation, or we've got a reevaluation. And I just kind of tried to lay a couple things out. There's so much that you could go into detail with, but these are just the most important pieces that you need to pay attention to. So we know that once you've gotten consent, the 60-day timeline has started, right? So you're not in school, there's been an interruption. Please, this is the great time where you are working with the parent. Most parents would go, oh, yes, of course, and I'm going to extend that period of time. make sure that it's mutual, and make sure that you have written consent on the new time. If there's any planning documents that you need to revise with a different date, please go ahead and do it. Don't forget the details of the paperwork. Even though compliance is, not one of our favorite things, this is where, again, it demonstrates that you are providing all the things you do to protect a student's rights, both under the IDEA, Section 504, ADA, that you're not discriminating against them. Want to make sure that any invitations you have, maybe it's been bumped to next month, that they reflect that, okay? If you want to meet by phone and you've got all your information, do it. There's nothing that says you can't, but make sure the invitations say the new date, the new method, and of course, the required people that need to be there. I say this, I've said this to all my staff for many, many years: take good notes, include pertinent quotes. Again, so much comes to us on a daily basis. You can't remember everything, nor should you. But when you memorialize it, it's not like you're doing it for the wrong reasons. You're doing it for the right reasons. You want facts, you want accuracy. And it's a great way to, trigger that mind, go, I do remember that conversation because I said this and the parent responded this way. Again, utilize that prior written notice, not only to memorialize the meeting, but the consideration. Remember, I said that is a legal term. It's a legal thought process. You're not automatically saying no. You're considering the information. Then you're writing those, making those decisions. And if there's disagreements, there might be, then you're documenting those disagreements and what the district is trying to do in order to overcome that disagreement. Get signatures. That's the most important thing on that piece of it. You can be done electronically. I've done it where you literally email around the sign-in sheet, and that's certainly fine. If you have this type of mechanism, there's a place there for the participants, and they've signed in and they can agree there. So there's various ways to do that. On the phone, again, that's a little bit different, but you can have a verbal and document it that way. Just remember, recording, the same rules apply. Some states, you have to give notice that you're going to record a meeting, and others, you don't have to do that. So please, refer to your state.
So Kate, before we go on to the next slide, some more questions from our audience. What is the duty towards students who are mid-eval and expected to graduate?
Mid reevaluation?
Yeah.
And to graduate from high school? Okay, so let's go into the reevaluations. So if you are only doing a record review, you've got more flexibility. So you don't need that, consent per se, and the timelines can be more flexible. If it's a high schooler and you're just doing a record review, and that planning document has already said you're doing a record review, let's say it didn't. Now you want to just do a record review. Revise that invitation planning document, talk to the families, et cetera, and document the process. And then do your record review. Do they qualify? Don't they qualify? Do they meet whatever that is? Graduation's different. So I just want to make sure, I know there's connections, but I just want to make sure we're really, really clear. Some states now are moving to, if a student meets performance before this all happened, they're going to be graduated. Some states are a little different. Again, that's why I keep saying, go back to what your state Department of Ed is telling you, because they're going to be the ones that are passing the legislation that's going to allow that.
Several questions on emailing. Can we email IEPs without jeopardizing student confidentiality?
Yes, because it's very clear. This has been going on for a long time. You can absolutely do that. Now, do not do it from your personal email account. Do it from your school. You're acting on behalf of the district. You can do that. Sometimes people I did this all the time with receipts. So I would get the email to say that person has received it, opened it up, so the receipt came. And In some cases, depending on what the legal matter was, I'd be able to print them out and say the parent received it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways to go ahead and do that. You can also, I mean, my phone has it. A lot of computers have it, where you can scan it and send it right away, and then the parent can send it right back. I mean, there's so many different applications now that, in this regard, has actually made it easier.
Okay, let's go on. We only have a few minutes left.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. The individual education program. So I just want to make sure that you feel comfortable that you're using the same format like we talked about. Electronic, just all the things that we did. But here's where you need to really pay attention. Use the same process, use the same formalities. Introductions. I'm Dr. Foley. I'm going to be the district representative. I'm so-and-so. I'm the speech pathologist, gen ed. All the same team members need to be there unless they've been excused prior to that. Have your meeting. Make sure that it's in the format that is in the invitation. Maybe it's a new invitation. Take attendance, as I gave some examples of how you can do that. Take good notes. Again, utilize the prior written notice. I'm probably drilling that in, but I'm doing that purposefully. It's not a bad tool. It's a very good tool. Embrace it. And I use the various mechanisms that your district has: email, scanning, photocopies, could be certified mail, whatever it might be. Okay, next slide.
Okay.
So all of that, then there's another section, and that's the dispute resolution process. As a classroom teacher, you're going to be once removed from that. And so your district, be it the special ed director or assistant superintendent, what have you, is really going to be working with the legal firm on making sure everything is where it needs to be. But confer with your district's attorney and the complaint investigator. There are some that, based on this new world that we're living in, and will work with both the district and the family to come to the mutual extension of time. But in the absence of that, please adhere to any established timelines until that decision has been reached. You always want to really focus on that mutual agreement, mutual being the word that we really want to use. Again, memorialize it in the IEP, the prior written notice. I say here, details matter. Write down as many details as you can. I remember I trained staff on how to write a defensible IEP, prior written notice, and it actually worked to our benefit in a lot of cases. So, and then regularly monitor your state's department. Okay, there is a mantra of this: pay now or pay later. So all the things that I've been talking about today, you can say, well, I'm not going to do that until, a complaint comes. Well, you're going to pay for it down the road with a complaint. So let's look proactively. Let's look, and if you move to the next slide, Doug, communicate, communicate, and communicate more. Meaningful relationships have always been the best way to resolve differences when it comes to special education, legal, 504, all of those disagreements. It is even more so important now. And recognize that there's going to be disagreements, there's going to be legal challenges, but the more that, now think legally, the more that you can demonstrate that you are doing all the right things or attempting to do all the right things, that's what's going to take you through to the end of this. And then when the new IEP or hopefully the new school year is going to come around, and things will be a little bit more settled. But that's where you're going to be able to have your legal standing. Any director of special education is going to go, yeah, this is what we need to do, because we need to demonstrate that we are doing all of those things, and we have considered, under the legal umbrella, all the different elements to make sure that the student not only has access, not discriminated against, but they've been provided a free and appropriate public education. Okay, so next slide. So the takeaways were this, and this was from the question earlier about different software. I would just say, whatever makes sense for your district, right? However you're going to start to unpack this and repack it. I need for you to work together. Now is not the time for general education to be on one side of the room and special ed to be on the other side. We need to say, all right, we're dissolving the brick and mortar, we're dissolving the barriers, let's work together on this. Communicate authentically, memorialize the conversations and decisions. I'm going to emphasize that over and over again. And then I just gave a really small spattering of vetted resources. Vetted, curated. That is the optimal word. You cannot have just any willy-nilly web and start to go from there. I gave a couple. Creative Leadership Solutions has a great amount of resources, so I encourage you there. Center for Online Learning and Students with Disabilities, there's a whole resource page that then takes you in, right? So get in, click in, and then you start to go into that. Some other great ones, Common Sense Media. They have great special education applications and websites, not only for special education, but also for EL. And oftentimes those are our kids too, okay? Smithsonian, Twig Education, there's a wide variety. Believe it or not, the New York Department of Education has a great set of activities and strategies for families. New York's just one example. There are many states that have those. The American Federation for Teachers have Share My Lesson. NEA Teacher Resources the same way. Khan Academy, go to the UDL site. I would also mention this, and I know Doug can share this, is the Marshall Memo. Kim Marshall amazingly put together a great document just this week on all these free materials, websites that you can go to. That's vetted, that's been curated. So those are just the small pieces of that. I would sum up by saying this. There is as I mentioned in the beginning, there's a lot of information coming at you. There's a lot of companies that are going, let's go online, let's do this, let's do that. I guarantee. I say, take a breath, step back and say, we're pretty smart people and we know what we're doing here. Work with your team, work with your school district, but then also follow the legal precedent of a FAPE via the IEP or 504. Pay attention to legal, keep both in your mind, start to move down the practical road. You can pull those essential pieces out and you can deliver it, you can monitor it, and then you can go from there. I'll turn it back over to Doug.
Hey, thanks, Dr. Kate. I want to assure everybody we have hundreds of people who sent questions in. We're going to give you a personal answer to every one of those. So I want to assure you that we are committed to you and committed to education. And as Kate said, don't don't jump out and buy things right now. Now is the time for people like us to be of service to you, and
Right.
And we're literally doing everything from delivering meals to helping kids and teachers and leaders however we can. So thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you.